Good day. Today we are going to start with Chapter 1 of WST 111. So, in the first lecture, we're going to focus on Section 1.1, which is populations and samples. So, this is the objectives outlined in page 20 of your study guide. So, after this section, you should be able to differentiate between a population and a sample, identify the nature of the data. You should be able to distinguish between the branches of statistics. You should be able to understand the role of probability in statistics, and you should differentiate between methods of collecting data. So, before kicking off this section, let's have a look at what is statistics. So, statistics is the science of making sense of numbers. One example is when you have the marks of students and you want to see how they did. Instead of just staring at the numbers, you would maybe want to draw a graph, so representing it visually. You also want to make informed decisions in the presence of uncertainty and variation. Okay, so without variation and uncertainty, there's no need for statistics. And we also want to organize and summarize the data to be able to draw conclusions based on the information that is contained in the data. Okay, so what is a population and what is a sample? This is on page 2 of your textbook. So, a population is the whole collection of objects which you are going to study. So, for instance, let's say you're doing a study on ants, okay? The whole population will be all the ants there is, okay? Let's say you have information on the entire population, then you'll call that a census. But this does not happen often because of time and money constraints. So, instead, you're going to draw a sample from your population which you're going to study. This sample is a subset of your population. Okay, there's a nice picture showing that the sample is only a part of the population. On page 3, we define a variable. So that is a characteristic whose value may change from one object to another in the population. This is also what you want to measure. Okay, so in this first data set that you have, we have the student number. So that's just the identifier of the student. And then what is his gender? So this is an example of a variable, the gender of the student. Okay. Because we only have one variable in this data set, we call that a univariate data set. Okay. In the second data set, we added the height of the student. Now we have two variables measured for each student. So we have a bivariate data set. Let's say we put the age as well. Then we can say that we have a multivariate data set. So this happens the moment when you have more than two variables. So now we're going to look at the nature of data. So on page 3, just above where we define the variable, there is a brief explanation of types of variables, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So we have qualitative data and quantitative data. So under categorical, the qualitative data, we have ordinal and nominal variables. Okay, so ordinal is where the order is important of the categories. Nominal is when the order is not important. On the next slide, I will give you some examples of ordinal and nominal data. Quantitative or numerical data can be classified into continuous or discrete. After we had a look at the categorical data, we will have a look at the numerical data. So, categorical variables, ordinal, remember that's where the order is important. So, an example of this is the ratings. Let's say we are rating movies. There's a definite difference between a movie that has 5 stars and a movie that has 2 stars. It is possible for us to say that the movie with the 5 stars is better than the movie with the 2 stars. Another example is the hotness of a chili. This red chili over there is definitely hotter than the chili on the green chili on the left. Okay, so nominal data is when you have categories, but there's no definite order in the data, in the categories. So that's, for instance, eye color or marital status. There's no order of the categories. Okay, let's move on to the numerical data, your quantitative. So your discrete values are what you can count. So that's countable sets. So it will be integers. Continuous data is what you measure. So that can contain decimal places. So, first example of discrete data is the number of pages in a book. You can count that. Also, the number of cars sold at a dealership. Continuous data, remember, that is what we measure. So that is, an example is temperature. You measure temperature. And also, height is also a continuous variable. Okay. So on page 3 in the textbook, we have a look at branches of statistics. So, statistics has 2 main branches. Descriptive statistics, which we use to express and explain and illustrate the data. We use that to have a deeper look into the data and a better understanding of the data. Okay, so we do that with graphical measures and numerical summary measures. Okay, that is what we're going to do for the rest of the chapter. Your inferential statistics, we use the sample information to draw some conclusion of the population. We use inferential statistics to speculate and deduce and gather some information about the population. Okay. So the next thing that we need to understand is the role of probability. Where does probability come in? So, probability forms a bridge between descriptive and inferential techniques. In the probability problem, your properties of your population is known, and you want to gather something about your sample, where your inferential statistics uses your sample to make conclusions about the population. Okay. Then, collecting data. This is explained on page 7. This is very important because if your data is not properly collected, your investigator may not be able to give you accurate decisions or answer your question correctly. So, this means that the sample that you take should be representative of the population from which it is taken. Okay. So on page 7, there's brief explanations of types of sampling methods. So I have listed here 5 sampling methods that we will have a look at. It is the simple random sample, the stratified random sample, convenience sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling. Okay. I have uploaded a video from YouTube onto ClickUp. Please go and have a look at this video. It explains these 5 principles very nicely.